Very good morning, all dear participants. I, Dr. Payal Bansal, welcome you all on the behalf of Purnima College of Engineering in this 6 days short term program on artificial intelligence and 5G communication technologies. It gives me immense pleasure to have Dr. Neelakandan Rajamohan from IIT Goa for his expert talk for today's session. Dr. Neelakandan obtained his PhD from IIT Madras in the area of wireless communication. At present, he is serving as an assistant professor in the School of Electrical Science in IIT Goa. Previously this, he had been serving from for IIT DM Kanchipuram and VIT University Vellore. His research area include signal processing for 4G, 5G wireless networks, massive MIMO, wave communication, and beamforming. He has published several papers of his research work in reputative journals including IEEE Transactions and IEEE Communication Letters. We are so blessed, sir. We are waiting for your expert knowledge. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Payal Bansal. And thank you for the invitation and this opportunity to interact with you. And I would like to thank Professor Garima Mathur as well. And good morning to all of the participants. So here, I hope I can start with okay. Now the topic we are going to discuss and along this lines, what we have been already exploring several topics and insights into the topic millimeter wave, massive MIMO, and all other aspects for the past 2-3 days. So along the lines, just I have to share few more lights on the topic and to give you more insight with respect to the signal processing aspect in the millimeter wave massive MIMO. In particular, there is a wide interest in applying the compressor sensing topics in the signal processing in massive MIMO. So let us just see a overview of what are all the techniques available or what are all the techniques they are trying to make use of and the technologies behind that, and then see how the compressor sensing framework plays an important role in the signal processing for the millimeter wave massive MIMO systems. So before that, let us see why we have to go for all the 1G, 2G, 3G. So let us have a glimpse of what all these generations. And the picture what you are seeing in the screen is just nothing but a screenshot of the data transfer that is happening in 60 seconds around the world. So you can see the numbers, like how many YouTube downloads, how many Netflix transactions, how many Facebook photos uploaded, and Twitter, all those internet transactions, what the number, the approximate statistics, how many of them are happening within 1 minute or 60 seconds. So you can see how the numbers are overwhelming, and that gives some kind of a feel that how much our day-to-day life is binded with internet. So we can say that without internet, we have nothing to do at home, including this online workshop. So this demand actually increasing day by day exponentially. So that is why we are looking for some like innovative technologies or completely breakthrough techniques to cater all these data demands. And where we have come across, starting all the way from 1G to 5G, let us have some overview or just look backward on those technologies, which will give us some kind of insight how we are proceeding, what exactly we have in front of us. So from 2G, I will come to this part 1G. Why 1G is not in the picture? We have 2G, 3G, 4G, and 5G now. And with compared to 4G, what is the demand or what is the evolution we are expecting at 5G? 1,000 times data and 10 to 100 times connected devices and 5 times lower latency and 10 to 100 times end user data rate and 10 times battery life. Of course, more and more we are going for higher technology mobile phones. The battery life, in the sense that, for example, if you have an older phone 1108, if you full charge it, that may last for at least 1 day. But our modern smartphones, they don't last even for half a day if you keep on using that with internet and browsing. So, but this is like a kind of how we are going to solve the problem or mitigate the effect of high battery draining and so on. Let us see all these terms and terminologies one by one to get a feel for what all these techniques and what all these technologies for. Now, what we are expecting from the 5G is that a kind of a multi-domain performance, not only for cellular, not only internet is not only meant for just browsing, that has to do a lot of things. That is what we mean by the multi-domain performance and energy efficiency, a global standard across the world. Like we don't have a particular standard in India and German standard and so on. So we have to follow a global standard for the cellular communication, and how the internet and the technologies in the 5G and the wireless help the industry and society. And there are several other which are still in the gray area where we have to think and explore more, like machine type communications, personalized televisions, and critical massive MIMO communications, and so on. First of all, as I said, let us quickly go through the 1G to 5G. So what we have come across so far. In the 1G, the first generation mobile phone, how we have that? Like that was earlier in the 1980s and it was until 1990. And these cellular phones are based on analog systems. I hope if you are from the electronics and the communication background, you may be able to see the difference, the analog systems and the digital communication systems. And the speed up to 2.4 kilobits per second. Actually, this is not with respect to internet. This is the control channel data rate. And the standard which was controlling the 1G phone was AMPS, Advanced Mobile Phone Systems, that was launched by US. And that was the first generation mobile systems. And this kind of phones allow the users to make voice calls only within the country. Of course, if you have to make a call outside the country, you have to go for the telephone booth to make ISD call. So the earlier 1G cellular phones allow the users to communicate only within the country. Then we slightly developed where we have that second generation cellular phones. I hope you can remember these pictures if at all you have been using cellular phone for a long time. And there we first introduced a digital communication system into the cellular technology, and where we have the speed supported up to 64 kbps. And we have the digital services like SMS. Once the SMS started to incorporate it into the mobile phone, the so-called, if you remember, the pager device, that went obsolete. Earlier, they have a system, some small device, which was referred to as pager, to just communicate short messages. Okay, so that became obsolete once they started to have the short SMS service in the cellular phone. But still we have the 2G handset. Maybe the people who don't like smartphones, like elderly people, our grandparents, parents, they may use this 2G cellular phone yet. And again, there is another generation in between, which is 2.5G. I will come to the labels. Actually, the 1G, 2G, 3G are labels. They refer to certain standard and 2G standard, 3G standard are labels. What are all the technologies we have under the hat? That is what we are going to see. Now, next we have the 3G. Of course, this is what we might have been the mobile phones was started to prevalent among several users, and it was started to wide applicability and wide usage, which was invented in the early 2000, and where we have the transmission rate from up to 125 kbps to 2 megabits per second. And the voice quality was pretty better compared to the earlier standards. And the good clarity, even the very first video conference was able to do in the mobile phone in the 3G standard. And very first, we have started to have several mobile app, like for email, online shopping app, banking apps, games, and all those started to run the mobile phone once the 3G communication started. This is the time we have started to use internet in the mobile phone extensively. Until the time in the 2G and 1G, internet is not part of the mobile phone. Mobile phone was meant for speaking, just for the voice call. Then the mobile phone has started to become like an integrated device, including email, SMS, internet, and so on. Now we are at the 4G, the recent generation, what have been developed so far since 2010. and fast and more reliable. And we have the 4G service providers in across all the internet service providers started to give the 4G technology, 4G data rate. Let me call it as 4G standard. And with the data rates are in accordance defined by the 4G standard. And the performance is pretty much well compared to the previous standards. Now the smartphone, what you are having will be most probably would have 4G. If you are in a 4G network coverage, your mobile phone will have access to the 4G network. Now still we have the backward compatibility. A 4G network can connect to 3G, in fact 2G as well. Now we are moving into the next generation 5G, where it has a 10 times more capacity than the previous, and the expected speed up to 1 Gbps. If at all you say you have a 5G mobile phone, the speed of the internet in your mobile phone should be in the order of gigabits per second, and more faster and reliable than the 4G. And of course, we are trying to optimize the cost than the previous generation, but that may not be possible at the initial transition stage, because once the number of users start to grow, then only the cost can come down. Nevertheless, we don't worry about the economical part of it. Let us have a quick comparison in a technical terms, like 1, 2G, 2.5G, 3, 4, and 5G is expected to come soon into the market. And the deployment, what are the years that have started to deploy, and the bandwidth, what is supported bandwidth by each of these standards, and what is a backbone technology that is serving the communication, analog cellular, digital cellular, CDMA or IP technology. CDMA stands for code division multiplexes. If at all you remember a cellular phone by Reliance, which has initially started to give you with the inbuilt SIM card, that is CDMA technology. At the time you have to buy a mobile phone, the mobile phone would have the inbuilt SIM card into that. There are two cases. One, you can buy a phone and put a SIM card onto this, insert SIM on this, like a GSM phone. That is what we refer to as GSM. And another technology was CDMA. That was offered by Reliance earlier time. Like they will give you the handheld device. The device would have inbuilt SIM card where you don't need to buy a separate SIM card for that. If you remember, that is CDMA technology. But now again, in order to have a compatibility, Reliance also started to give it the separate SIM card, what we know as Geo SIM right now. And what kind of service they do offer? In 1G, it is only mobile telephony, just telephone over the mobile, that's it. And in the 2G, they have to give the digital voice. Voice is being digitized before transmitted, meaning that the voice communication was under the digital platform. And SMS, short messaging services also enabled at the time. In 3G, we have the integrated high quality audio, video, data, and so on. And in 4G, we know what we are having right now. And what kind of multiplexing? This is frequency division multiplexes. Now the time division and code division, hybrid form of that. And now onwards, everything comes under CDMA, and the 5G things are looking for multi-carrier CDMA as well. And switching techniques, like what kind of switching is that? There are two types of switching, like a circuit switching and packet switching. Where circuit switching, the transmitter and the receiver has a dedicated path. All your information flow only through the particular path. But rather in the packet switching, you just fragment the information into several packets and throw it on the network. Each packet will find its own way to the destination. So it's not necessarily that all the packets to follow the same path. That is what we refer to as packet switching. And nowadays, everything is under internet, so all of them are all packet switching. Now, very important, what is the core network? What is the backbone network that supports the communication? Earlier in 1G, that was public switched telephone network, PSTN, and so for 2G. Now we are completely relying on the internet backbone network. Right. Now it is very interesting to see what exactly our techniques are binded with the internet, how the internet backbone gives the communication core network or backbone network for the 5G standard as well. Now let us come to the technologies. So far I have been discussing, like in the layman terms, about the standards, which are labels for the different evolution of wireless communication. But these are the technologies that are used across different standards. First one, at 2G. Why we are not talking about 1G is that, and 1G, there is no internet in the mobile phone. That is why 1G is not into this picture. The internet was first given to, the mobile phone has access to internet only in the 2G time, second generation time. So we have the technologies, what is known as GPRS, General Packet Radio Service. That is what we call as 2G. And 2.5G is exchanged data rate for GSM, which was slightly advanced version of the GPRS, which we refer to as 2.5G, compared to 60 kbps that started to support up to 473 kbps. Sorry, this is bits per second. Sorry for this typo. And in the third generation, which we refer to as High Speed Packet Access Network, HSPE, that is the 3G. Of course, there was another technology which even still we are having now, wireless local area network or Wi-Fi, WLAN, Wi-Fi in the conventional terms. That is short range high speed network, that is in 3G, also in 4G. But that was first invented in 3G too. That's why it is mentioned in 3G standard. And the LTE, that is what currently we are using now. You can check your mobile phone, what kind of access to that, you can see this LTE, which is long-term evolution developed by 3GPP partnership project. And WiMAX is another competitor for the LTE, but due to some restriction on that WiMAX, now LTE surpassed WiMAX in 4G standard. Now the letters I have marked red in color is nothing but you can see in your mobile phone what kind of network you are accessing to. If your mobile adjacent to the network signal strength bar, if you see a letter 2G like this, exactly like this, you have connected to 2G network. But that is quite rare in city places or urban areas. Maybe rarely in some rural areas, still we have the 2G coverage and remote areas and so on. If you see a letter E, you are connected to 2.5G, meaning that the data speed is entitled only to give you this much amount of data speed for the internet access. If you see E, you are at 2.5G. If you see H+, you are at the 3G standard. If you see either 4G or HD, any one of these, you are on the 4G standard. The HD stands for high definition voice quality. If you go to the settings and disable the option, VoLTE option, you will see 4G. If you enable, you will see HD. This is how our mobile is connected to the different standards and with backward compatibility so far. Now, we have come across several standards and labels and technologies behind those standards. Now let us move ahead. What is the 5G and how do we expect that? Actually, instead of going into too much math, I am trying to give you the flavor of different technologies, how to proceed further. Because within 1 hour, I cannot give you a lot of math and very strong background regarding the signal processing aspect. Just I am trying to give you the feel for how the things work. That's why I'm going very slow in the beginning. Let us catch it up later. And of course, then the slides will be help you to go through as a self-sustainable material. Now, like 5G is nothing but we are trying to make the 5G terminal as an integrated platform that should be backward compatible. Like your mobile phone, when you are in 4G, you can go to 3G network place, you can go to your native place, which is a village or wherever it is, that should work. Similarly, once we have started the 5G, then it has to be backward compatible with all the previous technologies. Yeah, it is very easy to say, but somewhat tricky to implement them. Now I have what are the different features we generally measure a cellular service provider or cellular network, and the corresponding description here, and what are the technologies that are promising us to achieve this feature for the 5G. Okay, so for example, data rate. This we know typically what is meant by data rate, the speed of it. Now we are expecting the peak data rate will be 10 to 20 times than the 4G speed. That is what we are expecting in 5G. Okay, to achieve that, what kind of technology or signal processing technique that helps me then? That is, either you have to operate at the millimeter wave band or go for massive input, massive multiple input, multiple output systems, which we call it as massive MIMO systems. So if we have to increase the data rate, we have to look for this technology. That is what this table means. And the number of connected devices. Yeah, this is something you measure like device per meter square. If you think of 1 meter, square meter, how many number of connected devices we are having? Earlier, we have only internet is meant only for laptop or computer, desktop computer or laptop may have the internet. Now, starting from our mobile phone, wristwatch, healthcare devices, everything has connected to internet. So the number of connected devices increasing drastically. So if at all you have to support such a drastic increase in the connected devices, there is one statistics predicting that by 2023, everyone almost on an average will have up to 7 connected devices, meaning that you may be having at least 7 devices which require internet by 2023 to 2025. So how to gather all the demand and their requirement and so on? One thing is that Internet of Things. Second, device-to-device communications and wider bandwidth millimeter wave and smaller cells. These are all the technologies that can satisfy this feature. And of course, spectral efficiency, if you are working in core communication, you might come across this term. The unit is bits per second per hertz. If I give you 1 hertz bandwidth, what is the data rate in bits per second you can communicate? That is what it says. The simplest case, if you make only one sine wave to communicate, plus sign for bit 1, minus sign for bit 0, then you are using 1 bit per 1 second per 1 hertz. Now we are trying to achieve the Shannon limit. How far we can go close to the Shannon limit. Already there are several coding theory techniques, information theory aspect working on it, like polar codes, turbo codes, and LDPC codes. All these codes are trying to achieve the limit. But still we have some techniques particularly tailor-made for the 5G. Those are nothing but filter bank multi-carrier coding, NOMA, non-orthogonal multiplexers, coordinated multi-point communication, COMP, and so on. And end-to-end latency. This latency is nothing but the minimum time required to complete one transaction. Right. Then we have device-to-device communications and smart data caching, then smaller cell employment. These technologies will help to reduce the latency. See, latency is nothing but, say, for example, you have a device at your home, like you have a sensor. Once you have waken up at the morning, say, for example, 6 o'clock, then automatically your TV has to switch off. Say, this is what the demand you want to implement, say, for example. Then you have a sensor at your home which sensing that you have waken up. Immediately the sensor has to trigger the television to switch it on. That is fine. Now, if you make your sensor, say for example, which is your wristwatch, just for example, the wristwatch can directly communicate to the television at your home. But at the same time, if it has to go through the actual cellular network, the wristwatch has to communicate to the cellular tower, tower has to communicate back to the TV. This round trip delay you can reduce if at all you have a mechanism to communicate between the wristwatch and the television directly. But this kind of device-to-device communication, like as we say, that is not straightforward, easy to implement. That has its own challenges. Like when we have to go for, when the wristwatch can directly communicate to the other device, when the wristwatch has to communicate to the cellular tower, all these protocols have to be specified. That is not as straightforward as we are telling about that. So, but this device-to-device communication is one of the very interesting and important paradigm to look for. And also, those who have many of you who are working for project proposals and all, that's a very good starting point now. And also now we are having something, Government of India has been initiating like the NSM, National Supercomputing Mission, and so on. So there you can write these proposals where you can implement these kind of systems and get project fund. Just this is my one of point I wanted to convey. Anyway, let me go ahead then. And the data processing speed and energy efficiency and mobility. So we have several promising technologies in 5G to cater different features what we are expecting in the 5G mobile phone. Now, out of all these technologies, let us pick a few of them and see how the signal processing happened in the technology, how we are going to proceed then. Right? So that is what we are going to see now. Now, the very first aspect is on capacity improvement technologies in 5G. So I'm talking about the first part. So what are all the ways to improve the capacity? Like that, let me pick up 2 or 3 features here and some of the technologies here correspondingly, and discuss about how the signal processing happens and what are some interesting future directions for your research and so on. So that is what the primary focus of the talk and how the things are going to flow subsequently now. Now, if you have to improve the capacity in the 5G, there are three ways. Like you can think of that as in a three-dimensional figure like this. This is what the current capacity you are having. And one way is to increase the transmission bandwidth. Another is increase the frequency reuse factor. Another one is increasing the spectral efficiency. These are the three different directions you can think of if at all you have to improve the capacity. Now that if you have to increase the transmission bandwidth, so that, if you have to increase the transmission bandwidth, then either you have to go for ultra wideband or millimeter wave communications, or you can think of cognitive radio technologies. This is one way of you can improve the capacity. Another aspect is that frequency reuse. Frequency reuse means that the same resource or same frequency slot given to you can be reused by some other users at different places without interfering each other. So some of the techniques some of the signal processing techniques we can think of like interference cancellation, cooperative communications, and connecting the massive devices together for some information sharing and so on. And the spectral efficiency, as we already discussed, what are the techniques that help us to improve the spectral efficiency is massive MIMO and NOMO. Now, out of these technologies, our focus is now in this topic or the ASC the workshop. What is all about this millimeter wave communications. Now, out of all possible things in the 5G, the workshop you are handling, you are taking now is on this millimeter wave communications, like how to improve the capacity of the 5G technologies in this direction. So that is what the millimeter wave communication comes into the picture. Now in the millimeter wave communications, we are going to see the several aspects in the signal processing, right? I think now we can see the big picture of what is the purpose or the orientation of this workshop and how today's session's talk is aligned with it, right? Now, like a capacity, like we have described in the earlier session, I have given some pictures for your reference. Okay, now let me go ahead. The millimeter wave communications, as the name implies, what exactly is that? See, in the millimeter wave band, so far we have been communicating between this red in color, like sub 6 gigahertz band, up to 4 or 5 we communicating. The 5 gigahertz band is used for the Wi-Fi now. Now the Wi-Fi hotspot in your mobile phone and Wi-Fi routers at your home, they are working at 5 gigahertz band. Above that, we don't communicate in general for this terrestrial communication purpose. Now, there is a lot of free unlicensed band from 24 all the way up to 300. Now we have slowly started to occupy some of the band in the 24 to 100 gigahertz band. And we refer to from 24 generally above 60. That is what the exact margin is somewhat not defined. There is no hard and fast rule. Typically, when you go above 6 gigahertz, or I mean, if you go up to 30 and above and all, we call it as millimeter wave. The millimeter wave, the millimeter stands for the wavelength of the wave. If you go that frequency, the wavelength of the electromagnetic wave is in the order of millimeter. That is what we call it as millimeter wave frequency. And this is nothing but the microwave band. So when you go increase in the frequency, we have the millimeter wave. Of course, I have to make a note of caution here. The word millimeter wave, the millimeter represents the wavelength. But in the wave microwave, micro does not imply the wavelength. Please don't confuse, because that means that this has lower wavelength than this. No. Wavelength of the microwave signals is in the order of meters. Wavelength of the millimeter wave is millimeter. So the word millimeter and millimeter wave implies wavelength, but the word micro in microwave signal does not imply the wavelength. Please keep in mind, right? Now, what are the ways, what would happen if you go for higher frequency? The very first immediate thing would happen is that, of course, if you have come across the basic attenuation characteristics of the electromagnetic waves, more and more you go for higher frequency, attenuation increases. What will happen? The signal will not penetrate for a longer distance. And okay, if you think of one example, do you remember the earlier antenna, what we have on top of our floor, like a bar kind of structure? Nowadays, the antenna you cannot see anywhere, I guess. But earlier we have an antenna like vertical sticks or stripe, one after the another, like stacked on a straight line, which is referred to as Yagi Uda antenna. The length will keep on diminishing, like decreasing order. That is a TV antenna what we have at home. Have you noticed the TV antenna? That is hollow. That is not a thick rod. That's a hollow rod. You can see a hole in between that, isn't it? The reason is that when you transmit at very high frequency VHF band, which is meant for TV, the frequency of the wave is very high. What will happen when the frequency inducing the current on the antenna? The signal can penetrate only a very small distance. After that, signal will die out. What will happen? The current will flow only on the surface, not into the core. That is why, irrespective of whether you have a thick cylinder or hollow cylinder, that doesn't matter actually. Anyway, current will flow only on the surface. That is why, in order to optimize the material cost, we have the hollow, like the hole in between the cylinder. Instead of making like a cylinder rod, we are making that a hollow cylinder for pipe kind of structure for the Yagi Uda antenna. The reason why I'm telling that, when you go for higher and higher frequency, the signal cannot penetrate for a longer distance. So the typical cellular you are having like this with an antenna and so on. When you go for higher frequency, you may have to dense smaller cells like this because signal cannot travel. Typically, the size of this cell is maybe in the order of 5 kilometers in the rural areas, and in the urban, typically 1 to 1.5. But the millimeter wave cannot travel up to 5 kilometers and all. So if we have a millimeter wave tower, it can go up to maximum 200, 300 meters. And there are extensive research going on how to increase the range of millimeter wave communications. Right. And another one is that the massive MIMO. I will come back to this massive MIMO. Why we have a word massive? I will come back to that. But right now, let me just show the figure. Typically, when you have a millimeter wave tower, instead of 1 or 2, maybe typically you can see up to 5 to 6 antennas in the tower. If you want to know what is the antenna, just you look at the tower in surrounding you, you can see a vertical patch like this. Those are all the antennas. You can see in the tower 2 or 3 stripes around in the circular fashion. Each one will be facing one direction. That is called sectorized antennas. A vertical patch, a plate, a rectangular plate. That is what on antenna what you see in the tower. But in the millimeter wave, we will be having thousands of antenna in one single patch, and we'll be having an array of antenna patched on a particular stripe or particular plate. So that is what we call as massive MIMO. And these antennas can be dealt or polarized in such a way that they can form a beam towards a particular user. But technically, what is a beam? I will come back to that. But just I want to tell you in layman terms that if I have given you 1,000 antennas, you can control the signal flow in each and every one of the antennas in such a way that the signal from the antennas constructively going towards a particular user. That is what we call it as beam forming. So if you have 3 data to be transmitted for these 3 users, you can control the signal of the to be given to these all antennas in such a way that virtually there is a beam which are directed towards 3 of these users. User 1 data, user 2 data, user 3 data, so that they don't interfere with each other. That is why I have shown a pictorial with different colors. This is possible when you have massive number of antennas with some sophisticated signal processing techniques. What are all they? We will come back to that. Now, as we have already discussed, now just to give the numbers. Now, current band, we are operating at around 600 megahertz for cellular communications. Now, we are going for millimeter wave frequencies, which is about, I mean, not 3, maybe 30 to 300, say typically. And out of this entire very vast band, some of the bands were found that useful or very friendly for communication. Those feasible bands are 20 to 30 and around 60, and E band 71 to 76 gigahertz, 81 to 86, 92 to 95. These are all the bands where we have experimented that we can able to communicate in this band. If you communicate in other bands, the attenuation is very high, which we cannot tackle out. But maybe in future, some other techniques may come out how to tackle the problem. But as of now, we don't have any solution for that. And we found that only these bands are feasible for us for communication. Okay. Now, we are going to see a completely new communication paradigm, like not the existing or earlier communication. Once you go for millimeter wave, things change drastically. Now, what is one of the very basic advantage what millimeter wave naturally brings to you? One thing is that millimeter wave signals are highly directional signals. They are actually millimeter wave signals lying between the visible light and laser light. Laser, and of course, laser light, it is highly directional. That won't diverge. So millimeter wave is somewhat similar to laser signals. They don't diverge actually. And they have very smaller wavelength. Of course, they have wavelength in the order of millimeter. So what? Yes. I will come back to the start. I will explain this first. First of all, if you have to design an antenna for a particular frequency, then the size of the antenna must be equal to wavelength of the signal you want to transmit by 2, typically. So lambda by 2 is the size of the antenna. If you have to communicate a frequency f, where lambda is light velocity divided by f. If you go for higher and higher frequency, lambda will come down. So your size of the antenna will come down. Now, we have seen that from the microwave band, from 4G to 5G, we are going to 1,000 times increase in the frequency. So lambda will come down by a factor of 1,000. So then what will happen? Right now, LTE has 2 antennas in your mobile phone. Your mobile phone has 2 receiving antennas in your mobile. Now, since lambda has come by a factor about 1,000, in the same space, you can have 2,000 antennas at least, isn't it? Now, other question. Suppose if I place 2 antennas lesser than lambda by 2 spacing, what will happen? The 2 antennas will not give you any beneficial effect. Let me repeat the point. If at all you have 2 antennas, you place them closer than lambda by 2, then what will happen? There will be so-called channel correlation between the 2 antennas, which will affect the channel matrices singular values. Right? Then what effectively that means that if we have 2 antennas very closely spaced, lesser than lambda by 2, the 2 antennas will not give you any beneficial effect. It's of no use actually. It is equivalent to having a single antenna. If at all you have to feel the benefit of the more antennas, the spacing between the antennas must be at least lambda by 2. It is better if you have more. But of course, you cannot drastically go on increasing because your mobile phone has to be, the size of the mobile phone has to be brought down. Nobody will be interested to buy a mobile phone larger than a brick, right? Earlier we have a smaller phones. Now again the size of the smartphones keep on increasing. So that is because we are trying to place the antenna for more effectiveness. So in the same space where you have 2 antennas in LTE, there is a scope for placing 2,000 antennas because you are operating at very high frequency. That is why we come to the factor of massive MIMO. MIMO is multi-input, multi-output communications, but that paves the way for massive MIMO. You can have a massive thousands of antenna in your receiver and transmitter, right? With the help of thousands of transmitting and receiving antennas, you can nicely process the signals transmitted by the antennas such a way that you can avoid interference, you can make cooperative communication, and so on. That is what we refer to as beamforming techniques. Now, once you go for millimeter wave, that automatically opens the door for massive MIMO. Once you have massive MIMO, there is an avenue to place all the beamforming and other sophisticated signal processing techniques. So once the millimeter wave starts into the picture, all these things comes hand by handy. That is why the millimeter wave massive MIMO is somewhat a very interesting combination, right? Okay, let us go ahead then. What are the things in terms of benefits and challenges? Like, yeah, of course, as we discussed, we can have thousands of antennas in the transmitter and the receiver. And some challenges, what we are having with a large number of antennas, I have given with respect to some signal processing notion like pilot contamination, correlated fading, and saturation of the diversity order. These are all some of the problems that typically a signal processing engineer would face But anyway, this is something out of our scope now. And before I proceed to the rest of the things, I will show you some of the nomenclature what we use. If you have a single transmitter, single receiver, single input, single SISO link, and multi-input, single output link, and again and we have the beamformer where you have the multiple transmitting antennas and one receiving antenna, that is beamforming. And if you have multiple users, that is multi-user MIMO or multi-user beamforming MIMO, where you have to form the beam towards different user without interfering with each other. And this is what we are trying to achieve. But let us see the math behind that slowly. Okay, I think just I have summarized whatever I have said so far. I'll leave it to you for your reference later. And let me come back to the other part, the sparsity of the channel when you operated the millimeter wave. I know many of you might have come across the word sparsity. This is just opposite of the dense. Sparse means very less, opposite of the dense actually. When you have a millimeter wave channel, I will explain that in other words, why we have so many white spaces here. The channel becomes sparse. So that helps you to process the signal in a particular way. And that is allowing you to apply or give you the room for employing the compressor sensing concept. So let us slightly go back and see the background of this math, like what is a sparse signal, what is a compressor sensing, and so on. Then we will come back to this problem in the millimeter wave massive MIMO and connect these two together. Okay, just a minute. Okay, now let us go back, fold the other page of our coin. So we have to see the other part. What exactly is a compressor sensing? So far I have given you the different technologies, different flavors, why the workshop is conducted on millimeter wave massive MIMO, what is the interesting combination about that, and what is the problem we are looking at. This is what we have discussed so far. Now let us come to the mathematic part of it. What is compressor sensing and how it is applicable to all the problem what we have been discussing so far. First of all, we have to see the difference between compression and compressor sensing. The compression is typically used in the image processing. Like you have an original image, you have to compress that such a way that after compression, you don't see the difference. I mean, visually, conceivable difference between the original and the compressed image. But the compressor sensing tells you that you have to acquiring the image itself is subset of measurements, meaning that if you look at the raw form, you have no intelligence from that. But actually after processing, you will come back and get the image. That is what compressor sensing, meaning that while you sample itself, you compress that. What is mean by that? Let us think of one simple example. As we have already discussed, what is meant by sparsity? Sparsity is nothing but, suppose if we have a vector, the sparsity can be think of number of non-zero entries. When a vector is sparse, when we say a vector is sparse, that the number of non-zero entries is far less than the dimension of the vector. Say you have say around 9-10 size of this vector, but you have only 2 non-zero entries. So the number of non-zero entries is far less than the dimension of the vector. That is what we call a sparse vector. Where the sparsity comes into picture, let us see one simple example. Suppose you have a signal sine 2 pi 53t and 531t. Now, of course, you know what is the Nyquist theorem, right? Nyquist theorem states that you have to sample the signal at the rate twice the faster than the highest frequency present in the signal. Now, you have to sample f of t at the rate of 2 times 531, say what 1062, I guess, right? Now, if you process at that speed and you sample the signal and reconstruct the signal from the samples, that is what the spectrum you are having. Okay, frequency versus power spectral density. Right, now what happens? The sub-Nyquist sampling, meaning that you don't sample at this rate, you come for the lower rate. Let us see what happens. What will happen when you sample at the lower rate and reconstruct? You are not exactly reconstructing. There is a slight difference in their amplitudes here also, but not compared to like this. Okay, when you can go for the sub-Nyquist sampling? At any time can you go? No. See the frequency in this. One is 531, one is 531, meaning that out of the 0 to 531, only you have only two frequencies. All spaces are empty. So that is the signal is sparse in frequency. So like that, whenever the sparsity comes into picture, you don't need to go for the conventional Nyquist theorem or Shannon theorem. There is a way to process the signal with lower speed. So what are all the places you can go for that? When can you do that? For that, let us see some principles of compressive sensing. That is basically a signal recovery from sub-Nyquist rate sample. Meaning, you don't need to go for the Nyquist rate. You can reduce the sampling rate by a larger factor without losing the information. And we have a wide area of applications in the communication technology. Of course, this topic was primarily used in image processing. Now it has opened the doors in wireless communications as well. Now there are several techniques like spatial multiplexing, channel estimation, and signal acquisition. There are several problems like that, which you can employ CS principle or compressive sensing principles to solve the problem. Essentially, that offers a new platform for 5-layer signal processing in wireless communications. Before that, what exactly is compressive sensing in terms of the vector form? Okay, let us consider one simple linear measurement model. You have vector y, which is ax plus w, and the w is a corruption of that. Anyway, let us don't worry about it right now. Let us see the dimension of A and X. A is n cross M matrix, X is M cross 1 matrix. Right. Now, the problem is to recover X, the unknown vector X given Y. That is a problem. Now, if n is equal to M, which is nothing but A is a square matrix, unknown vector with full rank, then you can have the unique solution. Of course, I am telling about without the noise. You can simply take A inverse Y, that will give you X. But if n is greater than M, meaning that n is a tall matrix. Of course, if you have come across linear algebra and solutions of linear equations, this may be trivial to you. If not, just you take the message as it is. If A is a very tall matrix, and if you have to recover the vector X, then unique solution can be guaranteed, but solution may or may not exist. But if n less than M, meaning that if you have fat matrix, say if it is 3 cross 5, this is 5 cross 1, that is equivalent to you have 5 unknowns, but you have only 3 equations. That is what it says. Right? Suppose if you have 2 unknowns, you need 2 equations. That is what our conventional wisdom of linear algebra says. But if you have a 3 cross 5, say 10 cross 100 for example, you have 100 unknowns, but I have given you only 10 equations. How can you recover? So immediately our conventional knowledge says that no, unique solution not possible, right? But even when you have such a system, like A is a fat matrix with a 10 cross 100, that meaning that you have to recover a vector with 100 size vector or 100 unknown values, and you have observation 10. Equivalently, you have only 10 equations. Still, unique solution is possible. Okay, when the unknown vector X must be sparse, meaning that even though the X has a dimension of 100, if the number of non-zero entries in the X is very less than the dimension, still you can recover uniquely X from the given Y. That is what CS theory says. Okay. Another property is that the matrix A, what we call a sensing matrix in CS framework, in the terminology we call it a sensing matrix, that must have certain properties. Essentially, even if we have a fat matrix or underdetermined system, unique solution is guaranteed provided with sparse X and the proper choice of A. These two together would help you to recover even a 100 cross 1 unknown vector with 10 observations, provided the 100 cross 1 unknown vector should have very less number of non-zero entries. Okay. Anyway, how much less? I'm not going to the theoretical guarantees of that. Just to give you the flavor of what the theory is. Okay, and sometimes the unknown vector may not be sparse in its own nature. Okay, but you can transform that in such a way that after the transformation that becomes sparse. Let me take one simple example. Suppose you have one vector x, all one vector. Okay, so this vector is not sparse, correct? Of course, this is not a sparse vector because it has all non-zero entries. Now, if you take the Fourier inverse of that, what will happen? For example, if you take the DFT of this, DFT of all ones is in the frequency 1 followed by all zeros, right? Now you can think of a x vector as a Fourier inverse of s, where s is nothing but 1 followed by all zeros. Meaning that a vector may not be sparse in a particular domain. By properly doing the linear transformation, there is a way to find the sparse vector, or you can do the change of basis in the linear algebra context. There is a way to do the change of basis to get a sparse vector. So even though the underlying vector x is not sparse, you can multiply by a matrix such a way that you can get a sparse vector. Now in this example, I have shown with all ones vector, where the matrix to multiply with that is a Fourier inverse, where you will get all 1 zeros. It's a sparse vector. Right. So what are the different models we are having in the compressor sensing? One is a standard CS model, where we have either form of like this or form of like this. Essentially, these two are same. When the vector is not sparse in its own nature, you can multiply by a linear transformation and bring it to sparse. So you have a lengthy vector, you have a non-zero entries. That is a conventional CS model. And let me come back to this last. Another is like a block sparse model, where you have a large size unknown vector, but the non-zero entries appear as clusters. Like this is called block sparse model. And another is that you have multiple measurements. The sensing matrix remains the same. You have the different instances of the unknown vector, okay, and the unknown vectors share the same sparsity pattern, but not the values. Meaning that, say all of them are 100 cross 1 vectors. For example, in all the vector 4th entry and 20th entry, 99 entry are non-zero. But the non-zero values may differ, but the non-zero locations remain the same. That is what we call as joint sparse vector. And this is what we call as multiple vector measurement model, or MME model. And in the GMMV, where we have different sensing matrices to acquire different, we have again joint sparse vector, but each vector is sensed by a different sensing matrix. That is what we call as generalized MME model. So see the difference between MME and GMME. Here, for all the unknown vector, we get different observations, but all of them are sensed by the same matrix. But here, we have different unknown vectors. Every unknown vector is sensed by different sensing matrix. So we have different observations, which is GMME. Okay, now let me skip this for the time being. Please go through that. Essentially, what these two slides convey you is that what exactly is the property of the sensing matrix we require. The property we call it as the restricted isometry property, or RIP, and coherence, mutual coherence. Without regard to the equation, let me give you the feel for what does it imply. Suppose that you have a very large matrix. Say what I have taken an example. You have a 10 cross 100 rectangular matrix. Okay, the block RIP or RIP property tells that if you randomly choose some columns out of it, what is eigenvalues of the submatrix? That is what the RIP says. I think if you have come across eigenvalues and eigenvectors, they determine how the transformed vectors norm changes. I think if you, that's why I wanted to skip that. I am not sure how many of you have the review of all the eigenvalues and so on. Just I leave it to you. Those who have a strong foundation or some have taken the course on linear algebra, they will be able to understand these two slides. Okay, now let us connect these two pieces together. So we have seen what is millimeter wave massive MIMO and what is the beauty about that combination. We have seen the other page, like what is compressor sensing, how does it help to recover the unknown vector, provided that is a sparse. Now, what are the different signal processing premises which allow you to apply the compressor sensing framework in the millimeter massive MIMO. One, I have given few examples here, but there are quite many examples. I mean, quite applications are there. Just I have given very few of them. One is that spatial modulation. Another is initial cell search and beamforming, channel estimation problem, and signal processing, cloud radio access network, and wideband spectrum sensing. And of course, this is one of the very interesting problems people are looking at right now. And those who are pursuing PhD or who after PhD can think of some projects and proposals in this area with supercomputing missions and so on. There is a way to get a lot of funding opportunities and nice result in this area. So just have a look at the cloud area, cloud RAN, what we call CRAN, what we call typically in the nomenclature. Check for that. Anyway, let me go through few of them in the subsequent slides, maybe in the next 10 minutes. I will give you the understanding of the problem. Later, you can go through the slides. Anyway, I will not be able to complete all of them within the next 10 to 15 minutes. Nonetheless, I have made a slides in such a way that if I give you the background now, you will be able to see that of your own. Now, let me just go back to the picture rather than with the slides. Okay. Now, suppose we have two antennas, right? The earlier vertical laboratory multiplexing scheme, what is VBLAST architecture? Okay, what does it say? You have two antennas, put two symbols there, transmit. So they will be multiplexed in the air and reach the receiver. And after that, we have something known as space-time block coding, meaning that first time instant transmit S1, S2 by the antenna. Second time instant transmit minus S2 conjugate of it and S1 conjugate of it. But by doing so, there is a way to optimally receive at the receiver point. If you have come across what is known as Alamouti scheme, that is what this is. Just have a note of this word, and if you are working in the area of wireless communication, you may find it later, which is known as Alamouti scheme, ALAMOUTI, Alamouti. And the next is a spatial modulation. Something interesting, I will come back to that now. Here, in the spatial modulation, you are not using the two antennas. You are going to use only one antenna, right? Just follow the idea carefully. Instead of employing both the VBLAST architecture and the advance of it as Alamouti scheme, both of them are employing both the antenna. Okay, what do you mean by employing one antenna? If you have to transmit with the antenna, there is a lot of hardware on behind that, which are known as low noise amplifier, RF amplifier, and ADC, DAC, DAC, and so on, which we refer to as RF chain. So meaning that it has a lot of chain of hardware in the transmitting side and receiving side. So if at all you have to use one antenna, you need one RF chain. Now this requires two RF chains, this requires two RF chains. But here, again, I want to communicate the same two symbols, but I have a very nice way of doing that. One is that, say S1, S2 or BPSK symbol, for example. Okay, now S1 I will transmit, S2 will determine which antenna I want to go, I'm going to transmit. Say for example, if S2 is 0, I will transmit with this antenna. If S2 is 1, I will transmit with this antenna. And this will decide which antenna to transmit. The transmitted signal will be decided by the another symbol. Now, in the receiver, if we have a mechanism to find out which antenna is transmitting, then by means of identifying which antenna is transmitting conveys the information transmitted by S2. By means of decoding the information, you can get the symbol S1. So what is the difference between these two schemes? Here you are employing two antenna, transmitting two symbols, but here you are employing only one antenna, but transmitting two symbols. How? Modulation is done by the BPSK, but which antenna to transmit? So that is what we call a spatial modulation. We modulate the symbol by virtue of choosing which antenna to activate. That is what we refer to as spatial modulation. Now here I have shown on picture, say for example, you have four antennas, transmitter 0, 1, 2, and 3. Okay. Now say for example, you have a QPSK symbol or 4 QAM symbol. Of course, you know from the digital communication, this is what we refer to as signal constellation. If we have to communicate bit 00, you will transmit this one and so on, right? Now there are two ways to communicate. One, there are 4 antennas. So every antenna you can assign 2 bits. So every time, instead of taking 2 bits, you are taking 4 bits. First 2 bits determine which antenna to transmit. Next 2 bits to determine what to transmit. Suppose you have 0011. 00 tells that you have to use first antenna now. 11 tells that you have to use -1 -j to transmit. Right? Suppose you have 0011. This determines which symbol to transmit. This determines which antenna to transmit. So like that, in every transmission use, you can communicate 2 additional bits by means of the index of the antenna that was used for transmission. Okay, what is the advantage now? If you have 4 antennas, you can transmit 2 bits per channel use. Now, we have already seen that in millimeter wave communication, we have a scope for massive number of antennas at the transmitter, say typically in the order of 1000, say 1024 for example. Then, by choosing which one antenna to transmit, you can convey 10 bits every channel use, right? Excuse me. So that is what the additional advantage of having a large number of antennas. Without spending any RF chains, without employing any of the antenna, you are conveying the bits. That is what we call as spatial modulation. So every time you have a stream of bits, some stream of bits will determine which antenna to select. Another stream of bits will determine which signal to transmit. And finally, that signal will be transmitted by that antenna selected. That is how the spatial modulation works. Okay. And I leave these points to you. And again, just I have given one simple example. Suppose this is what the bit to be transmitted, 00 followed by 11. First 00 determines this symbol to be transmitted. Next 11 determines this antenna to transmit. So finally, the transmitted vector is this is 0. This is not transmitting 0. This is not transmitting 0. This is transmitting. So 1 plus j. This 1 plus j is this vector. Sorry, this value. It is sitting at the 4th place, which was determined by the next 2 bits. Okay, I think now you are able to get the idea of this. Now, can you see something about this vector? Now, do you see the vector is sparse? It has a large number of zeros and very few non-zero entry. Right? If you have 1000 size, you have a large number of vector, say 1000 cross 1, but almost all of them are 0 except a very few. So now automatically the millimeter wave induces massive MIMO. Massive MIMO allows you to do the spatial modulation. Spatial modulation unveils the sparse vector, which allows you to use a compressed sensing. That is how the pieces are connected together. Right? Now another example, suppose 0110. 01 determines which one to transmit. So 01 is here. So this is -1 plus j. This 10 determines third antenna to transmit. So 00, third place 0. Another example to show you more clarity. Okay, so that is what we refer to as the spatial modulation. And now we have some kind of feel for how the sparsity comes into picture for the spatial modulation technique. Right. And I have given a lot of other examples for you. Please go through that. Let me go to another example. So these slides are self-explanatory. If we have a background in wireless communication, this will be a cakewalk for you. Now, let me come back to another example where we have another problem, so that I can maybe wind up in another 10-15 minutes. Okay, so let us take another problem where this sparsity comes into picture. What we call as initial cell search, right? Typically what happens when we have the conventional network, like what we are having, we have macro base station, which we layman terms our signal tower, that we call E node B in the technical context, or macro BS. And every mobile is connected to the tower around it. This is what you are having now. Now what will happen if you are very close to the cell edge? So you will receive the signal from both the antennas or both the towers. So now, irrespective of whichever the tower it gets connected to, the SINR will be very poor at this mobile terminal. And there are some other problems like coverage holes. Suppose if you are sitting adjacent to a very tall building, there will be something known as diffraction effect, which will create you some problem and create coverage holes. And there are no hotspot facility in the conventional network. So there are several problems what we are having in the typical network, conventional network what we are having, or homogeneous network. To overcome that, it is proposed to have many low power base stations. Of course, we have already seen that once you go for millimeter wave communications, you may have to have a lot of smaller cells in the coverage area, like because one single cell will not serve the purpose. Okay, so we have a conventional macro base station which can serve in the order of kilometers, and we have small pico cells which cover in the order of 100 meters, say for example. And we have relay element. Relays are nothing but just to receive and forward relay elements, and some femto cells are order of 10 meters. Femto cells are nothing but a single building or 2-3 building, maybe a small administration block or small university comes under femto cells. You can create your own femtocell in your college. That is something like that. And the picocells are nothing but, for example, if you have a large stadium, okay, simultaneously whenever the suddenly IPL match or something is going on there, you can expect around 30,000, 40,000 audience in the stadium. All of them will be using their mobile phone, internet, everything. So suddenly such a load, a tower which was already there, unexpected to that. So that cannot handle that load. But all the time you cannot be prepared for 40,000 audience there. Match is not going to happen every day, right? So whenever suddenly you have planned for such an event there, then you can go for a picocell to handle the problem, right? That is what the picocell is meant for. Essentially, what we have seen, the name heterogeneous refers to the fact that you have actual coverage area by the macro. These smaller cells are overlaid upon it, and with different coverage area, different power levels, and so on. So that is why the name hetero. You have a variety, diversity of cells. And what will happen? Suppose you have a mobile at this point, right? Now that will receive signal from the macro, that will receive from the pico. Now the pico cell is meant for the stadium. Now one user is sitting at the last row, just maybe near the exit area of the stadium, for example. Then the pico cell will transmit the signal. Since he is somewhat away from the stadium, he will receive the signal from the macro base station also. Now what will happen? The power level of the pico is very small compared to the macro. So even though the user is very far from macro but close to the pico, these two signals will have equal power. So you will have a very severe interference at the pico. On the other hand, suppose someone is coming to your institute. Say I have come to your institute. Now your own femtocell access point or Wi-Fi access point will not give access to my mobile. So I have to connect to my faraway macro base station. Then the signal strength will be very poor because I am very close to your access point. Then my mobile has to somehow tackle the problem to attack the interference. So these are some scenarios. What will happen? Our conventional way of understanding that always access to the base station with the strongest power. This thumb rule is not always possible. But in existing network, that is possible. That is what happened. When you switch on your mobile or if you do the tower search, that will look around all the possible towers, choose the one corresponding to a service provider or corresponding which can give access to you, that one which has the strongest power. That is how that generally works. But such a convention of always choose the one with the strongest power, no more valid, right? We have to think of some other problem as well, meaning that you may have to choose a base station or server which is not corresponding, which doesn't corresponding to the strongest one. That is what the key point we have taken from here. Now, typically what will happen? Suppose I am in some other university, there are two buildings, they have two femto stations. There is some other place where pico is employed. So the mobile will receive signal from the two femto, one pico and one macro. Now, first the mobile has to identify all the signals around it and then choose the one which can give access to it. By chance, that access may or may not be corresponding to the strongest one. Nonetheless, first you have to identify the towers around you, right? Even though they are weaker one. But in general, while we are searching now in the conventional network, when the signal tower is very weak, it will simply ignore that. But you cannot do that. Whether that is weaker or not, you have to choose it. Now the problem is neighbor set identification, in the sense that when you stand around, you have to identify all your neighboring tower, at least some distance. Let us don't go with the mathematical details of it. You have to identify your neighboring towers. Okay. Now, typically, okay, I will come back to the problem then. Professor, can I have 10 more minutes? Yeah, okay, thanks. Yeah, fine. Let me quickly complete this point and we will conclude and I will open for questions then. So I will show you another problem where this sparsity comes naturally into the problem. Now this is how the data transmitted by the towers. They have a data and which we call as a frame, and this is one frame. And there will be some data for the users and there will be some portion of it which we refer to as synchronization signals. Actually, the figure is not to scale. Typically, the training portion will be 100 of the overall frame length, meaning that out of 100 symbol, one symbol will be dedicated for the training. Now, the training signal will have, a different training signal for different towers. So, tower 1 may have this one, tower 2 another pattern, tower 3 another pattern, and so on. So, essentially, identifying the training signal is equivalent to identifying the tower, right? Because the training signals are unique to every base station. Further, since all the towers are somewhere close to you but at different distance, they may arrive at you with different delays, right? This may arrive here, this may arrive here, and so on. Nevertheless, you can capture all the signals within a window, right? That is what the picture shows. Now, say for example, a mobile phone has received the superposition of all these frames, right? Also, the training signal will be transmitted at equal interval. The first frame, one training signal, second frame, another training signal, and so on. Right. Now, once you have received the frame, you have to identify the training signal where it is present, and then you have to identify what are all the training signals present in the signal. By identifying those signals, that will give you the identity of the tower. Let me elaborate more on this problem. Suppose that you have a training observation Y, right? Now Q1, Q2, Q3. So there are 3 base stations, right? Qi will be from 1 to C. There are C number of identities. Just for example, let me follow the standard of LTE. C is equal to 504, meaning that in the picture what we have seen, there are so many small cells, right? The number of such small cells can be up to 504. That is what defined in the LTE and the future generation. So at any time, there are 504 cell identities. Out of the 504, you will get signal from, just for example, I have taken 3. Q1, Q2, Q3. You don't know what is Q1, Q2, Q3. It may be 5, 6, 7 or 7, 8, 9, whatever it is. Right? Each one has its own channel gain, HQ1, HQ2, HQ3. Okay. Now, I can write in the matrix form, Y is equal to XQ1. Column underscore stands for the column vector. It is a 1 column vector. This is the scalar. So I can write as a H. This is nothing but equivalent to this. Now, let me think of a bigger matrix. Instead of Q1, Q2, Q3, 3, let me horizontally concatenate all the 504 vectors and think of another lengthy vector like this, H1 to H504. When you compare these two, if I think of this vector, which contains all zeros except at these locations, then these two equations are equal, right? Am I right? Let us take one example. Q1 is equal to 5, Q2 is equal to 7, Q3 is equal to 9. meaning that you are standing in such a way that you have 3 towers around you. Tower 1's identity 5, Tower 2 identity 7, Tower 3 identity 9. You have to find it out now. Now you have received the signal, which is nothing but the signal transmitted by Tower 5, signal transmitted by Tower 7 and Tower 9, corresponding by the gains. That is what your observation at your mobile. Now I think of a bigger matrix, x1, x2, x3 up to x504. I consider all the training signal transmitted by, hypothetically, transmitted by the towers, and I think of a lengthy vector. Now if you compare these two, this is equivalent to this. If you think of this vector with all zeros, except at 5, 7 and 9. Isn't it? Right. Now what is this vector? Now this is a sparse vector, because out of 504 entries, you have only 3 non-zero entries. And now the sensing matrix is actually coming from the training signals. I have already told you there are twofold. One is that the unknown vector must be sparse. The sensing matrix must have certain properties, right? Now the sensing matrix is now comprised of your training signals. Now there is a way to construct the training signals in such a way that the sensing matrix has the desired properties, right? The training signals are generally from pseudo-noise sequences, Zadov sequences, Walsh-Hadamard sequences, and so on, or Bernoulli, whatever. So the different types of sequences will have different types of properties. You can choose whatever the one that gives a desired property. Now on the other hand, if you have a frequency selective fading, meaning that you have more number of paths, automatically convolution comes into picture. Convolution can be written as a Toeplitz form. So what will happen, instead of your block, instead of your non-zero entry, now the non-zero entries will appear as clusters, which will have the structure of a block sparse vector. Now this is a sparse vector, this will become a block sparse vector. This is what happening in LTE. LTE has 0, 1, 2, 9 subframes, and each subframe consisting of the preamble and midamble. This is what the structure transmitted by the LTE, and this is what happening to identify the cell. So there are 3 PSS or 3 primary synchronization signals, 168 midamble signals. So what will happen? 3 into 168, 504. So each combination will identify the cell ID out of the 504 cells. Okay, I think the rest of the things I'll leave it to you, and of course quite of the things are pretty self-explanatory. Now let me open to the questions, and I have shared the slides already to the organizing team. And thank you. Let me answer your questions for next time. If you have any questions, any preferable simulation tool. Actually, these things can be done in MATLAB. MATLAB is pretty much enough for this.
Participants, please post your queries in the chat box if you have any, or you may unmute yourself and directly ask to queries you by sir. Sir, preferable simulation tool is MATLAB, as you said?
Yes.
Any other query? I think no queries.
Okay.
Thank you very much, sir, for the informative session. It was really wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. It's my pleasure too. Thank you, Professor Garima, and thank you, Professor Payal Bansal.
Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you.
Dear all, kindly turn on your cameras for a group photograph. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir, for the wonderful session.